I'm gonna give you 2 key hacks that you can use to improve your split jerk, and we're gonna start right now. Okay, so when we're looking at the split jerk, we've got to analyze a couple key factors. What are we trying to accomplish? That's the first thing. So we want to go a strong dip and drive, and that's going to lead into putting that bar overhead. And because we are doing a split jerk, we're going to catch that bar in that split position, ideally over top of our hips, okay, over top of the back of our head. So when we're looking at that, we have to apply a massive amount of force in a short period of time, and then hold technical position. So if we can hold technical position, we could then apply more force and then hold that position in that split to then recover properly. So we have to think through, what do we want from that foot positioning if we're going to be driving? If we're looking at that technical lens, we have to think through, if I'm driving as tall as I possibly can, ideally I would hold the exact same foot position as I would if I was doing a pull. So if I was cleaning or if I was snatching, I wanna establish that foot position, and that's exactly where we would get to when we're doing that dip. If I have my feet too wide, okay, I'm not gonna be able to drive as tall. If I'm wider here, I don't have as long of a drive as if I'm more narrow. Also, another simple thing to think about is if I was just gonna do a vertical jump, or if I would tell someone, go do a box jump, they would get set and they would jump. That's the foot position we want to establish for the dip and the drive. So we want to focus on having a much more knee dominant dip and drive. This is going to be similar to a basketball player landing, going up for a rebound as rapidly as possible. Okay, so that impulse level is going to be very, very high. A large amount of force in a short period of time. Now, the next aspect is that when we are going to get into that split position, okay, I want to see that I'm actually catching in the split position as wide as I would be if I catch a clean or if I catch a snatch, okay? So a lot of people often will stay very narrow in that split position, and then they end up walking all over the place, okay? Because they're not as wide with their base. So if we can think about dip, drive in the pull position, the catch in the split is now as wide as we would be if we do a front squat, okay, or if we would catch a clean or if we would catch a snatch. That's some real simple comprehension here. Now, I wanna help you establish that split position with these 2 unique hacks. So that first big hack, and you guys can use this today at the gym to establish that foot length. Where should I put my front foot? So usually I'm going to teach somebody how to follow a technical model. We'll watch somebody like Haley, we'll watch somebody like Quo, and we'll watch them execute a dip and drive. We'll watch them have a quick dip and get into that split position, drop that back knee, keep that back heel elevated. But we want to reverse engineer it and walk backwards and say, okay, a very, very simple trick is to establish, okay, this is where we're going to be when we're dipping and driving. So one thing that we can do is get down here and establish this is where my foot was, okay? Now, based off of where my foot was, I'm going to put my tibia down, okay? Now, I'm just putting my tibia forward. That's all I'm doing, is I'm taking this foot and I'm putting it down. Notice I'm drawing a line at the end of right where my knee is for my tibia length. So here, boom. It's very similar to how you establish a starting position of a 40, ironically. But what I'm gonna do then is go back to this start position. Okay, so let's pretend I'm right here. Okay, that's where my start position is on the dip and into the drive. All I wanna think about is getting my front foot here. Boom, a little long, boom, right there, boom. And what ends up happening is that the athlete, ideally, in this situation, will figure out that position and where they're comfortable based off of that tibia length specific to them. Their back foot should go where it needs to be based off of them thinking about putting their front foot in that specific spot. Now, the next thing I'm gonna give you is gonna be a bridge, which will then lead into that third little trick that you can use to optimize your overall split position. Now, the next thought that I like to have is typically we will have the athlete think 50% of the weight forward, 50% of the weight backward. And that's gonna lead us into, this is gonna be the bridge that's gonna lead us into that second big hack. If we use the tibia trick, take this, let's establish that, put that down, draw that mark right there. Okay, boom, boom, okay? That's where we're going to actually establish where that big toe goes. Okay, if we use that trick, we then bridge that with a 50-50, 50% of your weight forward, 50% of the weight backwards. Okay, now after we take that concept, the biggest thing that I like to do is now I will have the athlete try to self-organize. Think about it through this lens. If we have an athlete who's learning how to sprint or learning how to jump or learning how to squat or anything like that, we have to establish that technical model. And that technical model goes back to having that pole position for the stance, having the catch position be a little bit wider, like where you would front squat or where you would catch it clean. Okay, so that's the technical model. The dip could be a quick dip. It could be a slower dip that's a little bit deeper, but ideally I would recommend a quicker dip. These are just some technical models that we would then use. Watch somebody like Quo do a jerk, follow her, and use that as the guide. After we establish the tibia trick and we reference 50% of the weight forward, 50% of the weight backwards, one of the best ways to self-organize after you establish the model is to just have the athlete pause in the split. And they have to pause for 5 seconds. Okay, so do this today. Okay, you go through, you establish where that front foot position is gonna go. Boom, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And typically what will happen is if I get into this position right here, I'm gonna drop this back knee. I need to have my back heel up. That's what our technical model is guiding us on. And if we have somebody who extends the knee and extends the hip, they'll be here, but what happens in a pause is they'll go back to where they're in a position where the weight is more evenly distributed. And if they're behind or if they're narrow, okay, if they catch in a split here, they'll move the foot out to stabilize during that pause. So you use the tibia cue to establish where the foot position goes. Then you use the cue of 50-50 for them to just work through that positioning. You give them the guide on being a little bit more wide in the split, and then you use the 5-second pause to help them self-organize and help them feel the force coming directly down, not being too forward, not being too far behind, and not being too narrow. It's a very, very simple way to help the athlete feel the position while learning from the technical model. So we have to use that lens to help improve their overall technique. If you guys need help with your programming for Olympic weightlifting, head over to peakstrength.app, the Google Play Store or the Apple iOS Store. You can download Peak Strength today and start to get on that program to roll towards that big time total PR. Because remember, freaks, if you want to become a champion, you've always got to cultivate your power. Peace.